All right. All right, we have a quorum. We're all set to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Milton Conservation Commission meeting for February 29th, 2016. The Conservation Commission is appointed by the Board of Selectmen to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and also the Milton Town Bylaw governing wetlands. As a matter of formality, we introduce ourselves.
Judith Darrell Kemp.
John Kiernan.
Michael Blute.
Arthur Doyle.
First on the agenda is informational, 800 Brook Road. That's Eversource. We have folks from, if you'd come forward, we have a tape recorder running, so if you'd introduce yourselves and then walk us through this, if you would, please.
Take a seat here.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Matthew Waldrop, an environmental engineer with Eversource. With me tonight is Paul Bullier with Ty and Bond. He's a professional wetland scientist and an LSP.
Sorry, Paul's last name?
Bullier.
Okay.
Paul, please spell your...
B-E-A-U-L-I-E.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I had sent some notification letter and just some supporting information that the commission had requested before I sent it to Kathleen. I have some extra copies tonight, Kathleen, if the commissioners can get it, copies of the letter. Should be up there. So, in summary, the reason, excuse me, that we're here tonight, we had a transformer explosion, as you know, in early January, which resulted in some oil splattering inside of our fence station yard and also into an adjacent wetland. This letter specifically outlines some maintenance activities that we're proposing as a result of that. 5 trees actually caught fire during the spill, and they're severely burned, and we're proposing to remove them because they do appear to be dead and are within close distance to the station, so it's a safety issue for us, and we do want to cut those 5 trees down. If you direct your attention in the packet, there's actually a photo that has the trees labeled in red numbers, 1 through 5.
Yeah, I've got those, Kathy. Do you have those other photos?
Yeah, they're in the envelope.
Okay.
Before we start that, can you just tell us what is a transformer explosion?
This one here.
Oh, Dudley. I saw
You know, I'm not sure scientifically what exactly happens, what exactly causes it. I can ask our station operation crew if you're interested in getting them.
But what would someone see if they were standing there in the road?
Well, they would likely see oil splattered. In this case, it caught fire, so they may see a fire. It's within inside our station, so usually if there's a spill, a lot of it is contained inside of the fenced yard, but in this case, the oil was projectile and shot past the fence.
And why would this happen?
I'm going to tackle that a little bit.
Do you know, Paul? Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so neither Matt nor I are electrical engineers,
Yeah.
but I've been working for the electric company doing environmental cleanup work for 30 years now. So a transformer is exactly what it sounds like. It takes the energy from the transmission lines, which come from the generating facility, whether that's a coal power plant or a wind farm or natural gas plant, and runs it through the transformer and essentially toggles down the voltage to something that can then be put on the distribution lines, what you see on the utility poles, and fed into your house. And the way they do that is there's a cooling oil or coolant inside every transformer, whether it's these big substation transformers that we're talking about tonight or the ones on the utility poles actually take the voltage and toggle it down even more before it goes into your house. Otherwise, every piece of electronics you own in your house would blow up every time you turn the switch on. So in a case like this, and it's fairly rare, but I've worked on other ones, when there's a high demand for energy and draw from the system in a particular part of town that is serviced by that transformer and that substation, particularly in older transformers.
As in, how old?
How old was that one? Old enough to have some PCBs and
yeah,
one in
it's
a compartment.
Tough to say, but we did check our records. Couldn't find any info on how old it was, but we do suspect probably 1950s, maybe. After a certain year, it is considered PCB or non-PCB oil. Any equipment that's manufactured after 1979. is non-PCB.
Is this the only transformer in Milton like this?
No, the one right next to it.
Couple there,
There are two.
on that site.
There's another transformer in the
Any other
same site.
locations?
I'm not entirely sure if we have any other substations in Milton. I can double-check that and get back to you. There are two transformers within this station, the one where we had this issue, and then there's another one that's existing as well. And we're bringing in a spare transformer to replace the one that we had this issue.
And that was my original question, and I talked to Herbie, Kathy, help me, Herbie's last name? You probably know.
Herbie Glick?
Yes.
Yes, that's who it was. And I said, oh, so you're bringing in a new one? He said, well, we're replacing it. I said, with a new one? He said, no. How old is the replacement? And is that PCB-free?
That one, the oil is non-PCB. That is a spare transformer from a station that we had in Arlington. We have data, we did have that sampled to check the PCB levels. In the last page here, I attached some regulations from EPA that state in non-PCB less
How about DEP?
DEP. I'm not aware of any.
Transformer oil and PCBs are regulated at the federal level under what they call TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act.
So is it a preemption issue when the state has
Well,
no control?
they're different regulations. So the TSCA regulations define what is a PCB or non-PCB or PCB contaminated or PCB containing transformer. So the federal regulations limit that non-PCB is anything less than 50 parts per million in the oil. That said, the Massachusetts contingency plan regulations look at concentrations down to less than 2 to 499, and greater than 500 to determine what the reportable quantity of a release is. So your typical transformer on a utility pole has a capacity of about 18.6 to 19 gallons. If that's less than 2 parts per million and the whole thing emptied on the ground, it would be non-reportable because the reportable quantity is 25 gallons. If it's greater than 2, up to 499 parts per million.
Aren't those two different things, the quantity and the concentration? I know the 25-gallon
Correct.
reporting, but
Correct.
what about the concentration? Is it reportable if it was like 5 gallons, but it was more than 2 parts per million?
Well, they're tied together, so you need to know the concentration of what was released in the quantity to determine.
Both, okay.
Yeah. So we had this release here in Milton at the substation. I'm not sure we ever fully quantified it, but we do know from sampling the soils that we exceeded reportable concentrations, particularly on the petroleum hydrocarbon component. And so that's why we did all the remediation work out there. And the data table and the map I had in that information package to you tonight shows every single sample we've collected out there, the depth and the concentration of both petroleum hydrocarbons, because the transformer oil is typically petroleum-based, and the PCBs. So, and the good news is that we only found PCB in the cleanup standard for PCBs is 1 part per million, so it's pretty low. We had a detection of 1.27 in one soil sample at the 8-inch depth. So we sent Clean Harbors and my guys back out there. They were doing some more cleanup work anyway. We excavated more in that area. So every single data point we have at this point for PCBs in the soils that were impacted by the release is less than 1. So we don't have an exposure risk, a human health exposure risk, because we cleaned up the PCBs. We did have 2 data points for the petroleum hydrocarbon that exceeded the cleanup standards. And those are highlighted in bold, so sample PX 23 and 25. Those were taken right at the water table interface with the soil, so at 5 feet deep. Generally, we stop digging at the water table because we don't want to liquefy the soils and have the transformer or other equipment in the substation kind of collapse and cause a bigger problem. So the MCP allows us to look at the average soil concentration as a potential exposure that humans might have. And when we run that mathematics on this, the average concentration for the petroleum hydrocarbons and the PCBs are well below the cleanup standard, so we don't have a human health risk there. The one thing, because we did leave 2 data points behind that are above the cleanup standard, I have to now, as the LSP, show that that material is not leaching into the groundwater, causing a groundwater contamination problem. So the only way to do
Where
that...
is it? Where are those data points that you just referenced?
Oh, okay, those are 23 and 25, which are inside the containment berm area of the transformer, kind of in the lower left-hand corner. You can see P25. Right outside of that kind of conical
Okay.
shape we've got shaded.
25 and 23.
Yeah,
It's
so
on the
they're-
path, on the blowout to the left.
So there's,
Where's the driveway? I'm disoriented.
25 and 23, oh, there.
So we come in over substation entrance, I see where it is. Okay, now I'm
yeah,
oriented.
so diagonally across from that, across the substation, 2 samples, 25 and 23, side by side at the 5-foot, the water table depth. Have some residual soil contamination left behind, so at this point, the next thing that I need to do as the LSP to determine whether or not I can close this out and say there is no risk is to put in some groundwater wells inside the substation and collect some groundwater samples and run the same analyses, PCBs and petroleum hydrocarbons.
So after your excavation, the only 2 areas of concern are 25 and 23? So why wouldn't you go back and, did you take those down to 5 feet?
25 and 23 were down to 5 feet.
Oh, they were down to
They
5
dug a
feet.
big hole out
Yep.
there. We have some other samples around it, 9, 10, 12,
Yep.
13 that were clean, but those 2 data points, and they're fairly close to the concrete
Pad, yeah.
transformer pad and other equipment, and, you know,
So you can't, the problem is you can't excavate further, and and you just need to show that there's no chance of leaching.
correct.
How do you do that? I mean, I don't see how you can do that, because you're at the water table.
Well, I can install a groundwater monitoring well, actually, and I intend to do 3 or 4 of them.
Yep.
To kind of surround the area. So we would need to get in there with a drilling rig. We'd probably air clear down to 5 feet so I don't drill through any electrical infrastructure. And then using the drill rig,
Yeah.
probably put a well down to 15 feet or so and screen it across the water table from
Boy, isn't
12 to 2.
it looks to, and I'll defer to your expertise, but it looked to me like the whole area was filled. I mean, sitting right smack in
Oh, I
the
think
middle, there's
that-
water everywhere.
Yeah, the substation's surrounded by wetlands. Nobody's arguing that. It looks like it was built in the wetlands back before there were wetland regulations.
Right, that's what it appeared to me, but the reason I asked that question or set that predicate is because why would you get down 15 feet, or why would you need to go there? It sounds like it's sitting right on the water table.
Yeah, so we typically, when we put in these wells, we'll put in a 10-foot well screen. So it's a 2-inch diameter well. The 10-feet screen is just very narrow slots for 10 feet. And with the petroleum product, the standard is you screen 5 feet above the water table and 5 feet below. So if I go down to 12 feet and set the screen at 12, I'm going to have the screen from 12 feet to 2 feet. So I know if the water table fluctuates,
Okay.
I'm still, sampling the water. If I've got the water table up above my screen, I may be avoiding sampling the water that I need to sample at the depth I need to. So when you have a 10-foot screen, the water fluctuates up and down, but you're still drawing in water from the groundwater formation, and you're collecting a representative sample that way.
I just want to back up a little bit. There are 2 transformers in that substation, correct?
Correct.
The dark gray one is the replacement transformer.
The same color it is, Matt.
The one,
It's kind of a darkish gray, so it's a black, almost a black. That,
so that's the replacement, but not new transformer.
yes, sir. It's, the transformer we're bringing in is not, it's not brand new.
Correct. It would be great, I think, from my perspective, to get on a piece of paper the estimated date of the transformer that failed, the probable causes of the failure, measurable extent of damage, age of the replacement transformer. I'd like to know about the age of the other transformer that is there, so that we don't go
Right,
through this process again,
Again, but there's more than that, because I heard from 2 people on site,
that there's going to be a third.
no, that the second one is leaking, and you could see the staining on the pad. Is that true?
There is some leakage from it. We haven't investigated that.
That's the problem for us.
That's maybe where I got
Focused
the
on this
notion of
one.
a third, which would be.
The second one is leaked,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Yeah, when we put the monitoring wells, and I intend to put one down that end of the substation, so while I'm looking at potential groundwater impacts from the one that failed, I can also look at potential groundwater impacts from the one that's still in place with the dripping going on.
But how would you do that? Would you surround the pad, or would you drill down through the pad? In the
Well,
area
no,
where
I'd be
it's...
away from the pad. You can't do this that close to an energized transformer, so.
Well, they did here on 25, and I understand what you just said.
Yeah,
about
that one was
energized.
de-energized at the time. The other one's still active. Because the thing is surrounded by wetlands, I'm not really clear which way groundwater flow direction is. That's why I need to put at least 4 wells in there and get it on each side of the substation, so I can make sure I'm capturing all potential flow patterns from both transformers, potential impact to groundwater.
Okay, so you know that there's a greater than acceptable quantity of contamination. You can't dig further for it because you're at the groundwater table. You're putting in wells to monitor it, but there isn't a repair strategy in place. If you find that it's migrating, what's the repair? And where I'm going with this is, why aren't you doing that repair to start with and forget about the monitoring wells? Why aren't you just solving the problem for the...
Well, we have-
Because it's only 2 locations that are right next to each other.
Yeah,
Why-
no,
why
we
aren't-
have solved the problem from the perspective of the transformer that caught on fire. So that soil's all been remediated, other than 2 data points.
Right.
From an MCP perspective, as an LSP, in my opinion, that there's no significant risk there, and that's the phrase used in the MCP. That's a standard that you have to meet. I can show no significant risk for soil concentrations. Right now, I can't make that same claim for groundwater because I don't have data for groundwater, because we don't have wells there.
So,
You know, if the
even though the soil...
groundwater is contaminated,
Yeah, but isn't that what you're monitoring for? You're putting the wells in to monitor whether or not it migrates, right? And because you know that the
right,
soil is higher
initially,
than
I'm
it should be.
Initially, I'm putting the wells in to determine whether or not there's been an impact,
Right.
you know.
So you just check.
The second
If
is-
there has been an impact,
And it's a bigger...
then I may need to put in more wells down gradient. And we'd be back in front of you at that point, because down gradient anywhere here is going to be in the wetland.
Right.
So, you know, installing monitoring wells inside the substation, not in the wetland, is an exempt activity, but once I get in the resource area, it's no longer exempt, and we have to file a notice of intent.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the potential impact of, you're saying that there is PCB contamination that's less than 1 per
The
million?
PCBs have all been cleaned up. so
PCB, then what are you monitoring for? Just the
It would
oil?
be the petroleum hydrocarbon.
Oh, just the petroleum.
Yeah,
Okay.
the mineral oil has a petroleum.
Okay. But 100, so the PCB concentrations are within acceptable limits? Or they're
Correct.
0?
Every single data point.
Every single data point?
We're less than 1 part per million on every single soil data point on the confirmation samples we've collected there. So I'm not too worried about that, and, you know, PCBs are insoluble, so you just don't find them in groundwater.
Okay.
The petroleum hydrocarbons, different story. I need, because we've left some behind because of limitations and constraints with infrastructure.
Sure.
I need to find out whether or not that's leaching into the groundwater in quantities sufficient to cause an exceedance of a reportable concentration for groundwater.
Do you suspect that the concentration that you're seeing is directly due to the failure of the transformer? Or you think that, like the second transformer, it's leaking and there's something that's going on that you can't monitor?
That's a great question, because it's at depth. It could be something historical. There are ways forensically to determine that. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but if we need to, it involves collecting a soil sample or 2 and actually sending it down to a laboratory in Houston. It works a lot with the oil companies, and they can actually age it. I've done a lot of that work for oil terminals out in Revere, but I've never done it for these folks. The mineral oil transformer fluid generally degrades pretty quickly and biodegrades. PCBs don't. So, I mean, the good news is we've got all the PCBs out of there. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to degrade to where they're less than a cleanup standard, because they already are.
Right.
It's the petroleum component and investigation on the groundwater we're not quite done with yet.
Sorry to keep going. So the second transformer, the one that's leaking, that we know that is leaking, is that, you said that that has or does not have petroleum in its oil? In the.
Well, it's a mineral oil
It's a mineral-
dielectric fluid.
Yep, with no
There's different
PCBs.
compartments in that transformer that have different concentrations of PCB material.
So do the PCBs form over time through use and the concentration builds, or they're there when they're there in the oil and therefore they're there in the oil?
Oh, is there at the time of manufacture in
Is it
the
there?
oil? So, I mean,
They're not produced in the process of the transformer?
no. They were very popular in electronic equipment up until, as Matt said, 1979, when people figured out that there was a potential
Yeah.
carcinogenic effect there. And they're very useful because they can store
efficient.
the energy. They're
Yeah,
very
they're
efficient,
efficient,
they
yeah.
just don't break down.
Right.
And that's why the electric transformer manufacturers loved it.
Right.
Because they last forever, they don't break down.
So
That said, once they get in the environment, they also don't
They don't
break
break
down, it's why they find PCBs in polar bear flesh in the Arctic. Because it just moves through
Right.
the environment and the atmosphere at some point, too. So it's very important that we cleaned all of those up in the soil, so we don't have to worry about that migrating.
So this
somewhere else.
dialogue
I'm sorry, yeah.
brings clarity on what has been with the possibility.
Well, the second transformer doesn't have PCBs in it, period, right?
The one the replacement that we're bringing on site is non-PCB.
No, the one that's leaking.
One that, yeah, the one that's leaking.
I'm talking about the
does.
one that's leaking.
The one that's leaking,
That's where.
so there's three
we left
different
off.
compartments in the transformer that have oil that we test, the main tank, load tap changer, and the pot head.
Okay.
The load tap changer and the pot head are non-PCB. They have blue stickers on, which means it's been tested and non-PCB. But the main tank has ppm of 125, so it would be considered contaminated. I don't know if that's the part that's leaking or not, but that does exceed the,
Okay, correct.
So we need to get that determination.
Right, so do you want to come back next month or sooner? and
Well,
tell
no,
us-
when are you planning on changing that?
the...
Changing the second tank?
this- I'm not sure. I'd have to check with our station
Is
operations.
the new one up online yet, Matt?
I don't think
The replacement
that-
one?
I'm not sure on that either. I don't think that has been energized yet.
So that substation right now is working off of one energized transformer. It's this one with the
leak.
historical dripping.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't been able to get in there to investigate that to the extent that we've done here, because they need to get the one that
Right.
burned up replaced and online so that there's still
Right.
power being provided to that part of Milton. So once that new one that we're talking about that's non-PCB completely is online, then Eversource can create a schedule for investigating the second one that's leaking, de-energizing it so that we can actually get in there and sample it safely, and then make a determination about whether or not there's a reportable issue there, a
Yes.
That
reportable
helps a lot.
situation.
But do you have to, I mean, we already know from the test that it's at 125 ppm. So we know it's PCB contaminated. We
Is
know
that
it's,
the component that's leaking?
We're not sure if that's a component that's leaking or not. It could be a component that is non-PCB.
There's three different oil storage reservoirs in there.
But have you tested the oil, what it is, whether it's the mineral oil or the other? Have you?
No, on the leaking one?
Yes.
No, we need to get the new one up and running before we can shut the old one, de-energize it, and grab a sample. So there's still some investigation to be done on that one for sure.
But you can't get a sample of the material that's actually on the pad? There's not enough material there to test?
No, yeah, we need a liquid. We can't do a wipe sample. Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
timeframe. What's the timeframe for
Yeah.
getting the replacement one, number one, up and running?
Do you know that, Matt?
I do not know off the top of my head.
And then,
I'd have to
how
check with
quickly
our-
can we get the second one tested?
Yeah, I
I
would,
mean, we would want it concurrently, as soon as the other one's down, this one, they're redundant, right? We were told before that the transformers are redundant?
yeah, again, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I don't know. We would have to have at least one in service.
Right.
You know,
So
so
we
I
can take
assume
them-
once the other one is energized,
The substation runs more efficiently with two of them operating. When there's just one operating,
Which is what it is right now.
correct. You know, there's the potential that if there's
Right.
storm
my
event or
concern.
something.
The substation is
you-
operating on the older of the two, which is leaking. It's taking the full
Right.
load.
So if there's a failure on that one, there's a large
Down.
part of the town that's not gonna have electricity, and what they end up doing is bringing in a portable unit on a flatbed trailer.
And if it hasn't failed now, it doesn't mean that this extra load that it has is it weakening it.
That's
Oh, I
a
can't-
that's a
That's
fair
my
question.
concern.
Well,
Yeah.
It's a good question.
So I think, you know, Matt can go back to Eversource and get some answers
Yeah.
to these
So I
questions
can ref-
and forward that information to Kathy. From a time frame perspective, in terms of additional investigation, putting in the wells and maybe checking this thing out, the leaking one out is probably early summer is where I would hope to get in there, if not sooner,
That
but
seems like an awful long time frame. If it could be leaking PCBs into the wetland, time is of the essence. So this is, you know, March next week. The summer doesn't seem soon enough.
we'll push it as fast as we can, but, you know, people
Well,
need,
to let-
people need their lights to come on too, so it's, you know, competing interests, you know. We can say that the data we've collected from the one that blew up, of soil samples out in the wetlands are all below cleanup standards, so there's no impact from that. The other thing we know
Below
is,
cleanup standard doesn't necessarily mean no impact, right? I mean,
means no significant
that.
risk as defined by the DEP.
by the DEP.
and ecological risk assessors. And they developed their cleanup standards through a lot of people far smarter than I that have PhDs after their name and ecotoxicologists. And they put a lot of conservative assumptions in terms of exposure, duration, and concentration. So if you're below the S1 standards, from a toxicological standpoint,
You're good.
you're in pretty good shape, yeah.
So in terms of, so what's the, I was gonna say half-life, but that's not right. So what's the breakdown time frame? You said that the oils, the PCBs don't break down, but the oils do. What's a reasonable expectation of those oils basically dissolving or breaking down to being non-existent, or to whatever their chemical parts are?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We've seen on some of the pipe-type cable projects that we've done for Eversource out in the Boston, Dorchester area, so there they have their electric lines running underground in big 8-inch diameter transmission lines that are oil-cooled.
Yep.
And we've had some of those leaks, and it's in the order of 3 to 5 to 7
Okay, so it's a
years.
reasonable frame of time
to
that it
degrade. They, you know, they degrade a lot faster than we had originally thought 25 years ago.
Right.
That's the data. I guess the one thing I can say is that from doing, you know, perimeter inspections around the substation, and we know that wetlands are typically discharge points for groundwater, we're not seeing any oil sheen or any oil residue popping up in the surface water surrounding the wetlands. So, and from that perspective, I think the risk of ecological exposure is fairly minimal right now.
How often are you gonna monitor the wells?
That's a good question. Generally, DEP likes to see a minimum of 3 quarterly rounds of groundwater data before you can conclude that it's not leaching.
Right.
You know, it's more than just one data point on one particular day.
So a
You have to be
year?
able to pass the straight face test, you know, and we looked at it in March, then again in July, and then again in November.
Right.
Those are all below the reportable concentrations. I can say that there's no significant risk through exposure to groundwater. and the standards, the groundwater standards come in 3 different tiers, whether you're relying on that groundwater for a drinking water supply, or whether it's a discharge point, and there are potential ecological receptors. So that's the GW1 versus GW3, and the standards for GW3 are a lot higher, because you're not worried about humans drinking it.
I'm sorry,
So, and I believe that's the area of the town is all municipally served by a water supply, so nobody's drinking the water in that part of town.
can we get a copy of your report when it's finally issued? So you're going to do a report after those 3 quarters? And
Yeah, I have to file what they call, when I'm convinced there's no significant risk either through soil exposure or groundwater, I file what's called a permanent solution statement.
And that includes the report findings as well? in
That's a
terms of
report,
purpose?
yeah, absolutely, it's a risk characterization we do. That gets filed electronically to DEP, and at that point, it's available to the world.
Okay, can we make sure that a copy of that gets
So,
forwarded to us?
And we are required to do public notification,
Okay.
so we'll let,
Okay, so the
Thank you.
controls or the lack of controls in the old transformer don't allow you to know which of the compartments is leaking.
We would have to, I haven't checked it myself to see, where the leaking is
Right,
coming
so-
from.
It could be one, or it could be more than one compartment.
It
It could be any mix,
it could be one, it could be,
which brings us to the point that the sooner the replacement gets online,
yeah.
the better in order to shut down the old transformer.
I don't understand your answer to that question. I think we all understand completely the sequencing. We've got to get the replacement up and running before you shut down the second older transformer. But what I don't understand is what's the delay on getting the replacement one energized?
yeah, I don't, I can't answer that question, because
It went in January.
it takes a while to get it all hooked up and running
That's
and
what we'd like to
tested.
get, that's the timeline that Judith asked for. and
So
others
we'll get you an answer
Yeah,
for
I
that
can
through
find
the
that answer.
operations department and the electrical engineers.
Do you remember the gentleman you spoke to on site that mentioned the second one was leaking?
I spoke to 2 people on site. One is a confidential informant. And he said, I don't know where it's coming from, but he didn't differentiate. And then I talked to Herbie Glick about it as well, and he acknowledged, he was the second one. But I didn't ask them the question or the issue that you brought up, and that is there are 3 tanks within the second transformer. But both indicated that there was some staining coming from the second transformer. But nobody attributed it to one tank or another. So
I'm not sure
don't
they
know
know
that.
completely
Yeah, I
because of its energized status.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the test would entail to determine which tank is leaking, but I can find out.
All right. I think our push is to speed up the process,
understand.
understanding the sequencing part of it. One of my concerns is that if the second transformer is leaking and it's old, then why isn't that one going to explode too?
No, it's a fair question.
Do you know how old the second transformer is?
I'm not sure, no.
But is it the same
That's what we asked
genre as
for,
the
that information.
50s?
I'd be guessing, but given
Yeah,
the
it's-
concentration of PCBs in the one reservoir out of 3, it's
Right.
likely it's of the same era as the other.
Yeah, that's a good point,
It
Paul.
would
I'd
seem it should
say-
be on file someplace.
Well, yeah, we have rooms, I understand, 5 rooms this size, full of cabinets that have, so I can check through it.
Big
but I-
company, but.
I know, yes, ma'am. Building on what Paul just said, I think it's fair to say that this transformer was probably before 1979, because it does have these levels of PCBs in the tank. If it was after, we would see everything being non-PCB, which is the case in the spare that we're bringing in from Arlington could very well have been.
What's the average lifespan of a transformer?
Again, I apologize, I'm not sure. I would have to ask our electrical engineers this, because do you know, Paul?
Well,
We have
I
transformers.
deal with
that
the
are
ones
old,
on the
so-
poles more
I
than I
know,
deal with the
right, different
pad
types of
mounts, but,
transformers.
Yeah.
But we're talking about these types of transformers.
I think they can last decades.
If we want, I can
So we're
talk.
almost at 4 decades for the.
No,
for
it's time
79.
to replace it, there's no question about it, and
Okay,
there's
that's
more
what I wanted to hear.
investigation that needs to be done.
That's where it's going.
No, I think the process is kind of
Amen.
starting with that,
Yeah.
I'd assume, especially after what happened with this other transformer. Okay, so, yeah, I know the transformers are all on concrete pads too, so I don't know if the spills are all If they
Contained?
are contained on the pad, it's possible they are. Concrete does absorb oil.
Well, understanding that the second transformer is actually active, is there anything that you can do to contain runoff or carry off from rainwater or anything like that in the short term until it can be tested?
That's what I was just going to bring up, too. I don't know if there's some type of containment, temporary containment we can put underneath the spot once they identify where exactly the leaks are
Right.
coming from. It sounds like they're very slow leaks, if any.
What's out there right now is some oil absorbent
Yeah.
pads and
Okay.
speedy dry that they put under. I don't know how often they're changed.
That doesn't do
It
well
was
in the
like a
rain.
5-pound bag.
And then
The
it's-
first day I asked.
Yeah,
my
no,
student-
then it's inside a concrete, there's a concrete containment wall that runs around all of that electrical gear.
Oh, okay, so there's no runoff?
Superficial runoff into the wetlands isn't happening.
Right.
It is conceivable that there's a vertical migration, which is what we saw on the other one. That's why we have those two data points at 5 feet.
Yeah, I mean, the transformer that has the leaking from what you mentioned, sir, I haven't seen it leak, but that transformer is probably about 20 feet on either side from the fence line, so it's not immediately adjacent to the wetland. But as Paul mentioned, if there is
Actually,
any,
it shows up pretty
It's
good.
awfully close.
Right.
I've been out there
Yeah, I went there
a number of
twice.
times, yeah. It's close. It's
Okay.
close to the actual open water.
Yep,
Yeah.
and I definitely want to get a monitoring well in over there somewhere as part of the groundwater investigation.
how close would you say in terms of a distance to the fence line from being on site?
From inside to the fence?
From the edge of the transformer to the fence line?
Less
Oh,
than
I
10
don't know,
feet. Just based on the diagram, it's
15,
less than 10
20.
feet.
Yeah, I would have said more 12 to 15, but I don't know.
Yeah,
But I know the water is very close to the fence.
Both sides.
Yeah, it depends on whether you've had rain or not, too.
That's
But at some point, it's right at the toe of the slope of the fill they used to make the substation.
In the big scheme of things, in terms of transformer catastrophes and that, to me, this seems catastrophic because it torched some trees and it basically threw oil all the way out. You're looking at like 75 feet of throw here.
Yeah.
In your experience, is this like a normal occurrence that you see, that this is blowing up, that equipment's going up this way? Or is this something you see once every 5 or 10 years?
Pretty rare.
This is the first one I've dealt
The
with
first-
personally.
How long have you been?
I've been with the company for about a year.
About a year.
Yeah.
But you've been with 30 years.
Yeah. I've been at Ty and Bond for 30 years. This is the only second time I've seen this. The other one was with National Grid at a very large substation in, I think it was Millbury,
Yeah.
that actually exploded. I mean,
Right.
people got close to getting killed because there were workers inside. They could actually hear it overheating and the oil was boiling.
Yeah.
And they just ran and the thing blew up.
See, now that you say that, we have a school across the street, we have kids
Yeah.
walking along, there are
Traffic,
You're not making us feel better.
Dudley
Well, I
Lane.
can't say it's very, very rare.
But in 30 years, you've only seen 2 occurrences, and we just saw one here.
We should- yeah.
And this is one of the 2?
Yes, correct.
This is one of the 2.
There's one and one for National Grid.
Oh, yeah,
That's how close the
close.
water is.
yeah, that's close.
Yeah.
You see the fence, so it's about
Yeah.
4 to 5 feet from the fence. Now admittedly, the transformer's inside the fence.
On two sides.
Yeah, no, the water's definitely close to.
I have,
Everything was built in a wetland. mean, you
I
can't
take
deny
no
that.
issue. I take no issue with your analysis or what you're doing. It all sounds proper. It's just the time frame to me. I'd like to see a little more urgency in
Yeah.
how you present this back to the company.
Yeah, no, I understand, and that's what I'll do. I mean, unfortunately, I wish I'd brought an electrical engineer or some, because a lot of the questions you've asked are beyond my ability to answer. I mean, they're questions that electrical engineers or our substation engineers could maybe answer better, but in terms of the timing, I mean, I obviously can't make that call, but I can inquire about, the time frame for energizing the spare and sampling for the one where the leaking is suspected.
Question, is the replacement fencing temporary fencing, or is that the new fencing?
Replacement fencing, what are you
Around
referring?
the transformer area,
I think that's the problem with this area right here.
inside away from the school?
Did that get damaged during the event? I mean, I don't recall
Now,
that
is
it was
this-
damaged. It did have some oil on it, which we tested and was non-PCB.
It's new.
This is the existing substation
built
chain link fence you're
Looks
talking
like
about?
it's new replacement fencing, and then the old fencing is leaning up against
Through
it.
the whole list, it's not very much.
I'm not aware of any new fencing going on.
It'd be good to have that. for
Yeah, I mean,
safety
all the electric companies, National Grid, Eversource, Western Mass Electric, they, every substation has a permanent 6-foot tall chain link fence, sometimes with the razor wire,
This-
depending on where you are. That's just standard operating procedure for the electric utility industry, because you can't have people wandering in and out of there. It's just really
That's
dangerous.
the point of my question, and this didn't look as durable as the original fencing at all.
We'll look into that. I didn't notice that in the 2 site visits I've done. I do know that the fence on the west side that got impacted by the oil release, there was some oil staining on the chain link fence and the post itself, so we actually did some wipe sampling on that. There's very method that EPA designates to determine whether you got PCBs on non-porous surfaces. And that all came back non-detected. We did the same thing with one of the trees. We grabbed a chunk of the bark and brought that to the lab, and they ground it up and ran a PCB analysis on the bark, and that was non-detected. So we're fairly confident that there really were no PCB impacts into the wetland from that event.
I'm just concerned that that's not much. I had asked they came in with an emergency, or Eversource came in with an emergency certification, which we granted, and I went down there, because I had asked for some kind of a spill protection plan, and I've got a picture of the total, it's a bag.
Bag of speedy dry.
A speedy dry. It's not very big, and there's a couple of plastic sheets next to it. I don't think that's sufficient. I mean, that wouldn't be sufficient for like a car garage. That's pretty small. Is there some way you could go back and just have something better than that on hand?
Control house.
Herbie Glick mentioned that. They've got several of those bags now stockpiled on site, with, I assume, to change out when necessary. Because he did mention that was a question the commission brought up in the site visit, was just to have extra material on site.
Yeah. All right. And what about, are the front-end loaders and backhoes and everything gone?
I'm not sure.
There was nothing there today.
Nothing yet today?
And then there's some work going on with the construction equipment to install the transformer. I was out there 2 weeks ago. I mean, Clean Harbors is done. We don't have any of that remediation contractor equipment out there. I don't know what's going on in terms of, the transformer has been put in place and set on the pad. Now, I believe they're just
All right, because
going
we
through the
had,
process of installing it.
there's a period of time where they were storing, there's a backhoe there, and there's like a Bobcat, both of them are
Yeah,
gone.
that was
Yes.
Clean Harbors equipment, so they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. So what are the takeaways from,
Well, one last question. So can you get us a response in terms of the schedule, I don't know, reasonably by the end of this week?
I guess there were several questions that were asked tonight. Kathleen, can you, I have some notes here, but just to make sure I don't miss anything.
So we have the
But I think before that.
well,
Just
when's
want
it
to make
going
sure
to
I
be
get a list of
energized?
questions.
Well, that's the schedule. We want a schedule of when it's energized and how quickly after that they can get a sampling of the
It's
second
just
transformer.
the completion of
And
essentially
they should be able to
starting
tell
up
us
the new
that by the end of the
transformer.
week, right? That's just a simple.
monitoring well
I was asking,
installation,
Will this be on the agenda for the next
de
meeting?
energizing the
Which
old
is only a
one,
week from now.
Yes,
and investigating soils around it.
right, the 29th. Our next meeting,
Now,
Kathy,
we
is
could
the
probably do the
8th.
groundwater and soil investigation.
Why don't we put
all
them
at the
back
same
on the
time.
agenda for
is
this
probably-
and have a schedule for when is the first one,
2
the
days of
replacement
work.
one going to be energized?
Wait a minute,
It's
wait a
gonna
minute, let me. Okay, you want what information by the 8th?
When is, I'll go 1 and 2, 1 is the one that exploded and is being replaced, so when is the replacement transformer going to be energized? Number 2, when is the testing going to take place for the, what I call number 2, the existing older transformer? And number 3, what's the schedule for replacing that one, the second transformer? And we have a next meeting on March 8th. Can you get that information to us?
Should be
So
able to.
we can put it back on the agenda. I don't
Sure.
know that you need to be here, but we need to respond to somebody.
Because I think I have another meeting that night.
Yeah, no, I'll work my tail off to get that info. for you.
Okay. All right, thank you. In addition to that, do we need anything else? The number of monitoring wells or the placement, are you going to be able to design something on a diagram like this to show us where your monitoring wells are going? I mean, you're the LSP, so we're going to defer to your
I got
expertise.
an
in terms of
approximate,
where you can put
I got an approximate location. When we're done installing them, we can provide you what we call boring logs, that actually show the construction details of it. Or I could send you a typical boring, monitoring well detail. They're all pretty much the same.
I'm just
other-
looking for the
yeah.
placement, because I'm concerned because we've got water basically surrounding. Not exactly where the driveway comes in, but the other three sides are
Yep.
clearly surrounded by water.
Yep.
So we just want to make sure that we've,
I'd like to get 4 of them in there, one along each side of the substation fence. So they got all 4 compass
makes sense.
directions.
John, did we also get a schedule for the tree removal?
oh, yeah.
And the
Are
replacement
those dead, or?
plantings?
I'd say they are, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't expect
These are
them
the
to live.
pictures that
Yeah.
Judith is looking at.
What kind of trees are they? I couldn't
Well, we were
help
talking
you.
about that earlier, because Matt
Yeah.
thought they were red maples, which makes sense, because that's
Yeah,
more of a
right.
facultative wetland species. And I thought they were ash.
They look
looking-
like ash to me,
Looking at the
but-
bark,
They
but
might
I don't normally see ash growing in wetlands, but
Yeah,
then again, this has been an interesting site, so
okay.
they look like ash to
They
me.
do, yeah.
What about replacing them there? Do you have any kind of a planting plan that you could put something back in?
Well, we want to work with you on that. We want to try to avoid any large trees, any kind of low-growing trees or shrubs.
Let's wait on that until we see what the construction is going to be doing, and maybe more at the next meeting and the one after, we can address the issue of what trees should go in
I'd
there.
still like to know, I agree with that,
quantity.
but I'd like to know the schedule for the removal and the schedule for the planting.
Okay.
The season's changing very, very quickly. That's a highly visible intersection,
Certainly.
and we want to have the least exposure
Yeah,
to the site as possible. You two
yeah.
Right.
Probably
And
want
you know,
the same
this
thing.
this is
Yeah, we-
Eversource. It's a little bit like dealing with the MBTA, and they'll say, we'll see you next decade." No offense, guys.
Well, you may get some stump sprouting out of the ones that we cut
Yeah.
down, it's hard to know.
It would be nice to put some American holly in there.
That
you
would
know,
look
not
nice in
back
there,
a little
'cause
bit.
they don't
Yeah,
get too tall.
The evergreen, the
You just have to find something that can tolerate its roots being
Yeah.
it likes the wet.
wet.
Yeah, the holly would like
Yeah.
the wet.
Yeah. I know in terms of the schedule for the the burn
sorry.
tree.
One sec.
Go ahead.
We're good?
The schedule for the burn tree removal, after talking to Herbie Glick, that's kind of an ASAP thing, I know they will, so, we can come back to the next meeting if you want, but just, you asked about the schedule, I don't know if there is any schedule for it yet, but the team's sort of seeing it as a safety issue since the trees were.
We don't want to know whether or not there's a schedule for it yet. I at least would like the schedule.
Okay, so an approximate date.
Good. So everybody clear on what the takeaway items are?
Just with the removal of the trees, we want the wood to be taken off.
Oh, yeah, we're not selling it. I don't know where that one came from. But no, you have to, if you take the trees down.
In your fireplace, right?
Assuming that they're ashes, the proper thing probably would be to chip them, so we don't have to worry about transporting the emerald ash borer, if that happens to be in there. I'm not saying they are, but,
Right.
I haven't seen it
no,
yet.
I live out,
Does chipping prevent them from
it'll,
spreading?
Yeah, it would.
I live out in the western part of the state, and they have those, they call Barney traps to monitor for the emerald ash borer, and they call them Barney traps because they're purple like the Barney the dinosaur. And the emerald ash borer is a pretty big problem out in the western part of the state. I don't know enough about whether it's an issue here,
Not yet here, no.
but generally, we don't like to move wood around, so.
But you're talking about chipping it and leaving it on site?
You'd probably take it
They
to
would
one of your
probably take it
satellite
off.
places and
They would.
just chip it.
They would likely take it off-site. We can do whatever you want with the wood. If you want it off-site or chipped and left on-site, we can do that too.
All right,
Whatever you
off-site?
prefer. Yeah,
Off-site.
that's what I would expect they do anyway. And if I may, I'm just a little confused on your question about schedule, because I know when I asked the team, they're going to say they just want to do it upon your authorization. I don't know if they'll give a set date.
Well, our interest is to get the relocated transformer activated as quickly as possible to allow us deactivate the existing, the second transformer,
Yeah.
and get the PCB testing done.
Yeah, I think
That's our goal.
Talking about the trees.
Yes, the trees.
Oh, I'm
is what I was
sorry.
talking
Yeah,
about. I
because the trees
apologize,
are
yeah.
actually in the resource area, so that's
Yeah.
actually an activity that you have some say over.
Sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was
I
the
don't
main
know
reason
how
for
the
the letter.
paperwork process for that would go at this point, whether you
No, I think it's on the agenda. We can vote tonight to allow that, the removal of the
extend the
trees.
emergency certification to
Yes.
include the tree cutting
You
as
know,
presented
instead
there.
of the, I see you're going to take it down to,
Yeah. They've taken two more, they've taken two already. Because when it first came in as an administrative issue, I did it.
Yeah.
And I said, take it down, because you couldn't get the crane
Get
in.
the crane in to drop the
Right,
the
so they
unit
took
in.
two down, well, 2 plus.
Yeah.
And then there were, what, another 5 here? So I'm not sure that they'd have room to put in, we have a
It's a
performance
bank.
standard of 3. Yeah, we do have a tree bank.
Okay.
And we do have a 3-to-1 ratio, if you're removing trees. And I understand you're saying it's a safety factor, and we're not objecting to
Right.
taking them down before you fall down, but
Yeah.
to the extent that there's some responsibility for killing them, I think we should impose the 3-to-1.
absolutely.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
We'd be willing, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We were expecting to do some type of mitigation anyway for taking down these trees, so.
And there would be only so many that you could put back on the site, and we as a commission have a bank of, that are available for other locations in town as they come, as they become aware of them.
Okay.
And then so people
That's
draw
cool.
out of the bank.
Okay.
Um,
So would we come up with some type of plan for so what we can do on-site? And then how
Exactly.
does the other process you were mentioning, the bank, work?
It's a, I don't know. it's a-
DPW can-
DPW can tell you how many trees they need, or we could put them in the tree fund.
Right.
Okay, if you come in with a planting plan, and let's say, so you take down 7 trees, you've taken down 2, there are 5 more, so that's 21 replacement trees. So if you come in with a planting plan and your landscape architect says, well, look, we don't want to put them too close together, we can use 12 here. So then we'd have the remaining trees out of the 21.
Planted
put into the
somewhere
bank,
else.
Planted somewhere else.
Okay.
So talk to your arbor
Yeah,
department.
definitely.
How many trees are you taking down altogether?
7.
It's just
2 of them are down
2 are
already,
down
5
Okay.
more. Historically, most of these substations were surrounded by arborvitae trees.
Arborvitae.
So, I mean, could be
Yeah, they
probably
make a
fairly
nice screen.
simple to get surrounded by
Yeah.
the holly, which is a native species.
Yeah.
Arborvitaes haven't been doing so well.
Yeah, they're not. The northern red cedars, not so good, yeah.
All right. Any other, are there any questions from abutters or members of the public? Any other questions from the commission?
No.
All right, so then we'll see you, Matt. You're going to come back on the 8th?
You have to vote.
Oh, we have to vote for the
Removal
approval.
of the trees.
Right. So that, as the chief arborist and bottle washer, do you make such a proposal to allow the removal of the?
Absolutely.
of those
For
trees?
public safety, to remove the 7 trees is justified, and to have them replace them with 21 altogether.
All right. And to take the debris off-site for disposal? That's part of your motion, right?
Yes.
Seconded?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Done. Okay, you're all set to take the trees down.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the 8th of March.
Great.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Thank you.
That goes with... Thanks, folks, for all of your patience. Next on the agenda is,
37 Chesterfield.
yep, 37 Chesterfield Street.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
There's the slips, and that's my card. For the record, my name is Peter Lyons. I'm an engineer, soil evaluator with Collins Civil Engineering Group. I'm here tonight representing Mark and Alyssa Fitzgerald of 37 Chesterfield Road. Mark is in the back if there's any questions for him. Basically, what we got going on is some renovations to an existing single-family home. What they're proposing to do is modify the existing single-floor garage to a garage with a master bedroom above it. Additionally, we are looking to build a wooden deck off the back, which would be impervious. Overall, the footprint of the house isn't really going to change much. We don't come any closer to the sideline, we actually get slightly further from the resource area in the rear. Basically, if you were to take the existing footprint and scooch it, I don't know if it's, looks like about 2-3 feet towards the street and away from the existing perennial stream. The project is outside of the 25-foot top-of-bank buffer. Erosion control is proposed around the whole project. That is outside the 25-foot as well. The pink line represents the 50-foot buffer, which pretty much cuts right through everything we're trying to do. That's pretty much it. If there's any questions in particular.
We did a sidewalk right this weekend.
Yeah, for the benefit of the public, we were there, what, 3 weeks ago? And inspected the property, and I don't think that we had any particular questions. I know you had an interest in one of the, wasn't there an American elm
Yes,
right near the
on
backyard?
the side property, as you look at the house on the left-hand side, that large tree that you see.
It's right on the property line, yeah.
Right. So just in terms of construction activities, we just want to make sure that that's well protected.
That's on the left side of the property?
You're
It
facing
is,
the house
as you're
from the
facing
street.
the house.
Yeah,
on the
I don't
left-hand
think
side.
nothing's going to be happening over on that side.
Okay.
I have a question. So because of the tight, the constrained area across the back of the property between the 25-foot line and the back of the house?
Yep.
Are you doing any excavation by hand? I'm trying to just understand, are you planning on doing any equipment excavating across the back of the house?
On the back side of the house,
For the new deck?
I would imagine the deck's just going to be on sonotube.
Sonotube,
footing,
good.
probably.
That's it.
Yeah,
No
okay.
excavating by hand.
It's all be done by hand, so we don't have to worry about equipment or?
Correct.
Okay, yep, thank you. Thank you.
Mark, could you just identify yourself for the record, because you just spoke?
Sure. For the record, Mark Fitzgerald of 37 Chesterfield.
Thank you very much. And the reason for the questioning, we just don't want to have construction equipment stored within the 100-foot buffer, which is 100 feet from the top of bank.
Sure.
So that's the source of the question.
Okay.
But it sounds like you're not using that kind of equipment anyway.
We are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Where's the, this is the 100-foot, where's the 25-foot? What's the
The
pink
orange
line?
is the 25.
Yeah, if your plans are
25
colored,
here.
the pink line is actually the 50. The 100-foot falls out around the center line of Chesterfield Road.
Okay. Okay. All right, are there any abutters, members of the public that have a question or a comment? Any other?
Nitrogen. Just because
Oh,
he's
yeah,
here.
we did talk about that on site, that's true.
Yep.
You want to bring it up?
No, well, if you, I just wanted to mention, since you're here, about the low nitrogen fertilizers. Because your yard basically flows down to the stream.
Sure.
Any kind of high nitrogen fertilizers are basically going to cause algae blooms in the stream. So anything that you use on your backyard really needs to be a low nitrogen. And the same pesticides, any kind of pesticides you use, if you could keep it to a minimum, because it all just becomes wash off into the stream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Duly noted, and we have little kids and
Yeah.
pets, so we'll be
Yeah.
very careful with that as well,
Yeah.
for all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And a dog.
nothing.
Yeah, no, I said pets, our dog, even if our dog was outside.
We met him too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a notice of intent, so is there a motion to approve the order of conditions with those extra provisions? We call them boilerplate provisions, Mike.
Sure.
And that is that you can't store, hydraulic equipment within the 100-foot buffer zone. And we'll add low nitrogen fertilizer for the backyard.
So moved with the provisions as discussed.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? You're done, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Next on the agenda is notice of intent 50 Robbins Street. This is a continued hearing. Hi, Paul, can you introduce yourself for the record?
Sure. Good evening, my name is Paul Sullivan, I'm Smith Road in Milton. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property at 50 Robbins Street to discuss the peer review selection.
All right, we have, and so the public can get caught up to date, we discussed this, I guess, in December or January?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
December, I think it was. And we had a concern that we wanted to have our own consultant, and we had put out a request for proposals, and we received two, one from Stephen Ivas, and I think his total cost was about $2,300, but it was a pretty detailed analysis of what he was going to do, and he also had built-in extra hours with he wasn't necessarily going to use. And then Lenore White had submitted one which was lacking in detail, but was much lower. She was, what, like $1,000 or $1,200, something of that nature. She has submitted a new one, which I presume you've seen, correct? And I think
so, yeah.
her hours are less. I think that her total package comes out to $1,400. Steve Ivas is not here. He's traveling apparently, and he's not submitted a revision. So what we're looking at essentially is the difference between, I think Steve is at $125 an hour, and Lenore White is at $95 an hour, which, doesn't sound like a big difference between 95 and 125, but if you, depends on how many hours you spend. And I respect both of them, so I really have no issue.
So it's to their choice.
Well, yeah, as long as they're equally competent, and I believe they are.
Yeah.
I think they are too.
So does Arthur, do you have a sense of, selecting one or the other? I think it's our choice, but we need to be sensitive to
Right,
cost
but
factors.
in terms of if
He's paying for it.
Yeah, if they're both competent,
I think they are.
then I don't think there's any reason not to let him pick the most cost effective.
I agree, I just
Well,
felt
I don't
that
want to, as a matter of procedure, I don't want to leave it up to it's our discretion.
Yes, right.
I think cost is a legitimate component and criteria for
And
consideration.
that's where I am. There's approximately $1,000 difference between the two.
Right.
And I don't want to put too much excess burden on the people who are going to have to pay those bills. So I tend to move on the basis of what I saw between the two proposals and the one submitted by Lenore.
Preferable.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think?
Both excellent, responsive.
I will say too, Mr. Chairman, that we've also brought Rich Kirby of LEC on the project now too, so I think we between Lenore and him, we'll have covered it pretty well in the spring when the...
Right, but
spring
Lenore
comes.
responds to us.
I understand, sure.
Right, so that if Rich Kirby comes in, that's within your province, and you're certainly entitled to do that.
Sure,
But we'd expect Lenore to be sending her reports to us, even though she's sending the bills to you.
sure.
Okay.
I understand.
But
You look like you had something to say or a question.
No, I think they're equally qualified, so I don't have a strong opinion about it anyway.
Okay.
So your inclination would be to go with the more cost-effective, I mean,
Yeah,
because,
that would be our preference.
That would
if
be
we
your
could,
preference.
Sure.
and I don't see any reason not to do that.
I agree. No, my only hesitation procedurally is that I don't want to cede that authority.
You have to be
to the applicant.
consistent and, yeah.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion to accept Lenore White's proposal as being the most cost-effective for our consultant?
Second?
Seconded, discussion, all in favor? All right. So Kathy, will you contact her? And again, I think we're looking at a mid-April.
Wait for the skunk
targeted.
cabbage to show up and then she'll come out, yeah,
Correct.
sure.
All right, fair enough. So do you want to put this on for the April meeting? It might be nothing, but it depends on the weather.
Sure.
And what's the date of our April meeting, do you know? We might be too early for April.
The 12th.
I don't know. It's really, I think it's a weather
May
call.
10th.
What's that?
May 10th is a May meeting.
That might work better, May 10th.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because then she could get it done during the month of May at some point. So with the assent of the applicant, we'll continue this until the May meeting?
So the assumption is, at that meeting, she will already have done her review, and she'll be presenting something.
That is
on May
correct.
10th.
Right.
Correct.
On May 10th, okay, perfect.
Sure.
All right, good. And Kathy, would you make that clear that we will expect, weather permitting, that she can get out there and get this done
Okay.
before then? Okay. Excellent. Anything else, Paul? Any other questions?
No, that's
thoughts?
fine.
All right, thanks. Next on the agenda then is 167 Woodland Road. 167? Is that the right address?
You have to do it because
There's
the
two
house
addresses,
hasn't been
167 and
built,
That's always-
151.
So it doesn't actually have to be
All right,
Yeah, that's the home address, the existing home.
all right. For the record, would you introduce yourself again, please?
Sure, my name is Paul Sullivan, Smith Road. I'm here on behalf of Joseph Delaney, who lives at 167 Woodland Road. So I'll just quickly go through what happened. I think the site walk was in November. We've flagged the wetlands. There was an area in the front that seemed pretty straightforward. Everybody seemed to agree with the flags for that. And there was an area in the back, there was one flag that was kind of out of line that
Can't wait.
wetland scientists go back and adjust that. We also added this flag that was already in the field that did get picked up on by the survey.
Can I hold you there? Did we just make a mistake? I'm looking at the proposal for peer review from Ivers. And it is getting confusing because we've got
in the
two
same-
sites.
Right in a row, yeah.
But the 2,300 that we were referring to, that's the proposal on 151 Woodland.
I think they were similar on both
Oh.
both lots.
I know the 2375 that we were looking at. Is it, because I don't,
It should be in the folder.
yeah, because the proposal that I was using was 2375, but I was using it for,
I believe
Robin Street.
Steve's is pretty consistent on both of them. They were pretty much the same price.
Same price.
Yeah, I think they were pretty close. Within $100, I think.
did we get a proposal?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, it was a while back, but from both, wetland scientists both submitted. It was pretty much the same numbers, very close.
It doesn't look like it's here. I think we may have been mixing apples and oranges. I don't see anything here from Steve Ivers.
Yeah, I think Woodland was actually a little bit, Lenore was a little bit less for, because this is more just two isolated areas. It wasn't the entire lot to work. For Steve's, I think, was pretty much the same on both.
151 Woodland.
Right, that's what we've got, but that's I know I was using the 2375 right there.
No, the
That's-
confusion is there's one email that's identified as 151 Robin Street.
You put the-
So there's a juxtapositioning.
Did you?
Does it go down at the same time, you mean?
He was over 2,000 on Woodland, too, and Lenora was,
No, Woodland I've got, but
I mean...
in my hand, that's
on
Ivers.
Robbins, he was in the 2,000-plus range.
This is, no, I just took it out, and this, I haven't put it anywhere, that's Robin Street. And I just took out everything except for the green cards.
I think it was about 21 or
this is mine.
2,200. It was
Oh,
almost the
that's
same.
it.
Yeah, I
This
got
is
it.
from the folder.
Right.
Here it is electronically if you want it.
What's the value on it? Can you open it? That's Robbins, or it's,
Yeah, see, it's Robin Street.
Oh, it is
But it's got
Robbins.
the number of the other side on it.
oh, wow.
See, it's 151 Robbins.
What is the proposal say?
Yeah, what's the amount?
That's, let me see if I can open it.
Gotta love technology, huh?
Yeah,
1,400.
1,400?
For which one?
For 151 Robin Street.
Right, those are the two numbers that I was using to discuss 50 Robin Street. They're the same two people, but
Now, Steve is definitely over 2,000. He was,
That was Steve, wasn't it?
No, this is Lenore.
Oh, that's Lenore. I'm sorry.
these are the two, but they're both 151.
For Robbins.
I Did you get anything for 50 Robin Street, Arthur?
I've got 151 Robin Street. So that's why I said there's a juxtapositioning
Yeah.
of the addresses between the two projects.
Do you have anything here with you, Paul?
I didn't bring that file, unfortunately, but Steve, when he sent his proposal the year before, remember we brought this up the year before, and he gave us a proposal, he was $1,750 a year ago. And then when he updated it, he went over 2,000. So it was pretty similar, the two numbers.
All right,
Yeah, I may have
This is
taken that
2375.
yellow
This
line.
is,
it's,
those two, those are Woodland.
it's 151 Woodland is 1,400, John.
That's 50 Robin Street, right.
So we want to keep Robin's Law.
I'm sorry, say that again, Arthur?
151 Woodland Street
Lenore was 1,200 for Robbins. She was 1,200.
is identified as the 1,400, I believe.
So it was almost the same
Estimated to be
spread.
1,400.
I'm sorry, this is Lenore?
Yes.
We're looking for Steve.
Are you sure this is not? Yeah, everything's 151 Woodland. I don't think we have anything for 50 Robin Street. We just voted on the 2375 versus 1,400.
No, they definitely both submitted. I have
did.
copies,
They
I didn't
both
bring them,
submitted.
unfortunately.
I don't know where
They
they
both
are.
updated them in December.
So it's not in Robbins, and could they be mixed up? Could it be in the 151? Is it in that one? Could they have been
That's what I
reversed?
wonder if they were reversed. This is 151 Robin's.
That's 151 Woodland. That's what it should be.
But this is in the wrong folder.
Yeah, that's in the Robbins folder.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It was about $1,000 difference. It was almost the same numbers.
Can we resolve this later?
Well, I don't want to, the mistake of fact was, when we voted before, we were talking about a $1,000 difference.
Right.
But we were using the bid on the Woodland Road instead of the Robbins Street. I can't find the Robbins
And the
Street.
only copies I see as well in my file is Woodland. It's all Woodland. It's 151
Everything's- yeah.
Woodland, but it's all Woodland. So we should maybe delay then
Well,
until
before
the
we-
next
before-
meeting. It's only in a week
Right,
to
okay,
get
so
this
true, it's only in a-
clarified.
get it all squared.
Because we took a vote on a mistake of information. So why don't we get the correct information
Yeah, I
only-
think so.
Both for
8 days away
151 Woodland.
Everything we've got is Woodland.
is Woodland.
Even from.
They did send them in.
Yes.
I saw both of them. I know we got them, yeah. Kathy forwarded them to
See,
me.
Kathy, even from your cover, it's Woodland. And it has the wrong address, but Woodland.
Well, I think we're within I mean, I'd like to get it clarified, because
That's fine.
our rationale was cost-benefit
It's almost the
analysis.
same, but that's fine, sure.
So I think we're within the timeframe for a motion for reconsideration.
Yes,
In order to correct the factual
moved.
predicate. Second?
Second.
In
yes.
favor? None, okay, unanimous. Vote to reconsider Robin Street. I don't think there'll be a problem, Paul, but
Yeah, no, there's no rush.
right.
Next meeting's fine.
yeah,
I did see both of them, and they're both the same.
well, they're in both folders, but they both say 151 Woodland. Didn't see that.
Kathy had forwarded them to me, so I'd seen them.
All right. Thank you for your understanding. But in the meantime, I actually have a question for you, Paul, and that is,
Sure.
with respect to the soil sampling, I think, and I won't quote you or me, because I can't remember exactly who said what, but at our last meeting, I thought we were talking about getting soil samples, and we received, I think from you,
Yeah, we're going to update
a
those.
web
soils.
soil survey, but
Right.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm looking at it, but I don't know what information is recorded here, because I think there are, number one, there are two sites, an A and a B site. And on this, I only see one colored area, red cross-hatched area, And it's not marked either A or B, and I think we were talking about an A site and a B site.
Yeah, I have them delineated on this plan here.
What, do you recognize this?
Yeah, it's,
What is it?
Well, it's after we were out there. It's dated, January 8th, and we were out there a couple of months before.
here's another version of
But I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
it. Steve had submitted.
And this is not the topographical map that you were looking for.
This is sent to you.
This is. Is that what you were looking for, Mike? I think you were concerned with some of the
I didn't think, the
elevations.
contours just don't match with the drawing.
No, he's updated those. He went out and redid a lot of survey
Okay.
work since.
Were
you
they
brought
out
it up.
of alignment? Were they kind of,
It was the ridge area up on the left-hand side that there was a problem. That didn't match up to the aerial that was done there before that. So
Because
he filled that information in, so, yeah, there's a lot more
Right.
detail. You can even see right here in the wetlands, now he's got the whole bowl, all the,
it's all formed with the contours?
yes.
Okay.
He did that work, yep.
The date on this map is that the
It was updated
December-
December 8th.
December 8th?
Yeah.
Right,
Right, which is this one?
yeah,
and
that
that's-
supersedes this one.
Right,
There you go, so there you got the two of them.
yeah.
So the two areas that we were talking about was over here. Judy had walked over and there was some dark areas. And then the area back here that Michael had brought up that he had some concerns.
So I don't mean to kick a dead horse, but can you tell me what this purports to be? If you can see it from there, I'll pass it down. But this, I think, what you just, Andy, do you have this,
Yeah,
Kathy?
same
Maybe you could,
thing, yeah.
okay. So what does that purport to be?
Mr. Hannigan prepared it. It should have blown it up a little bit more for the individual lot, I suppose. And it calls out some of the soils, but it doesn't have as much information as it should.
Okay, because I thought the intent was to get more information
This is
to our
Lucas, this is-
consultant,
Yes.
whoever it's going to
View
be.
it this way.
Well, I mean, they're gonna,
This is the street.
it sounds like
exactly.
both proposals, they're pretty much gonna do their own soil tests in both those areas, so. But we can submit, we can update the soils.
Did Michelle Grenier, what I was looking for, I thought, and this may go back to the site walk, but we were looking for the soil samples that she took.
Yeah, she did some, and there was some
He's got
question
upside down
about if
because the
there
wording's upside
sufficient
down, too.
detail in them, she was gonna redo them. She actually had a skiing accident.
north,
She's been
you know, they just printed
out
based
of
on
work
north.
for a period of time. She's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be coming back, and the weather's getting better, so we'll update the soil reports in those two areas and submit them to you.
Okay.
Could you actually bring the map up here? I didn't bring my copy with me, and, yeah. And I'm wondering, looking at here. So, what is the significance of the orange
These are the
circle?
two areas, this is the area you had questions about.
Right.
Right.
A couple, 3 test holes, and then this was the area that Michael had brought up. And those are the two areas, basically. Stations.
Yep.
We put some flags out there, so if the wetland sign just goes out, they'll
Okay.
find the areas.
Okay.
So that's how it relates to
And this
the-
reflects the change in the topography that we were questioning?
Yeah, there's quite a bit more topography on the plan than there was originally.
Again, I'm not trying to stall anything, but we voted to reconsider the 50 Robin Street, but we do have data on this site. The only hesitation I have is really not a cost issue, but I'd like the two
Right, there's only one.
scientists, what's that?
There's only one. How many are there on 151?
Two.
Two
Two
proposals.
submissions right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, the only ones that I can find, and that I recall seeing, are Steve Ivas and Lenore White. So the only, I'd like to have the soil data from her for those two sites. And those soil boring areas that are reflected, there are 3 on each site, 3 on A and 3 on B. Does she already have that? I mean, what I'd like to do is get that to Lenore White and Steve Ivas, so that they can factor that in. I don't know if it makes a difference, because I think you're right, they're probably going to take their own soil samples too.
Yeah, that's why I didn't put a lot of time into it, because I assume they're just going to do their own testing and own soils. She's got to be back to work, I think, next week, so I can, if you want us to submit that updated stuff, we can do that.
That would be helpful, but do we need it to address, go to a vote on this?
It seemed like both of them were going to just do their own work and not really rely on
I
what
don't
the
think so.
previous work, so. I'm reading the proposals that I saw, both of them.
All right.
It's a fairly limited area for them to do testing.
No, I agree. And the discussion we had on the wrong address is probably appropriate for this one. So it's really the same issue.
Right.
Do you have a sense or a concern with proceeding on this vote? Because we do have the data, and that's the
Right.
1,400 versus the 2,375.
Exactly, yeah.
So it probably makes sense for consistency and uniformity
Yeah.
to have the same vote. Are there any abutters, members of the public that would like to ask a question or comment? Or do you want
So I'll move.
to accept the proposal from Lenore White?
Correct.
All right, seconded? Discussion? All in favor? All right. So that one's resolved, okay?
What time, David, do you think she'd be going up there for seasonally, early April or mid-April, or you think she'd start?
That's a scientific call, and it may depend upon the weather.
Sure.
I mean, of late, it seems pretty warm, and we may have an early spring, and then that's going to make it a lot earlier.
Okay.
But how do, Kathy, this is going to depend upon how they respond, or if we can find proposals for 50 Robin Street. But it sounds like at this juncture, the only thing we've got on the agenda for March 8th is this.
And Eversource is coming back.
They are coming back, that's right, okay. So we can resolve it on the 8th of March, the 50
Okay.
Robin Street.
Sure, that's fine. I did see both proposals, so I'm sure that Kathy has them, because she forwarded them to me.
Well, if the proposals are in line with what we thought they were, why can't we just proceed with that? Why do we have to?
We don't have a record, and we need a record to take the vote on, and we don't have the proposals.
Okay,
We were using the proposals for the wrong address.
I understand. But if the proposals show to be what we thought they were, in line with the pricing that we thought it was, and we were confident about either one of the cost point,
We would
why
probably
wouldn't we
come-
proceed?
We probably would come to the same conclusion, but I'm a record guy, and we don't have a record.
Yeah, and I
to
I
vote
agree
on.
with John. I agree with you,
Well,
John.
I'm just wondering whether there's an agenda for the 8th, and if there isn't, if we're coming just to talk about that, I
Well, we've
would
got
argue that it's not.
Eversource, too.
What?
We've got
Eversource.
Eversource, too.
I see.
You can blame yourself. You were party to that.
Yeah, I was part of that. Sorry, everyone.
So, Paul, do you want this one then on for April or May? We can do it either way,
Should we ask Lenore
sure.
what she thinks the best?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
good
fine,
idea.
whatever she decides.
Done. Okay. So we have your assent to continue it, the date to be determined by the consultant.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, good, perfect. All right, anything else on this one? Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What they do with the agenda now. Next on the agenda is request for certificate of compliance at 156 Forbes Road.
We voted on this already, didn't we?
No, it wasn't a voting meeting. We were there, but we didn't vote.
Didn't we have a quorum?
It wasn't on the agenda.
Oh, it wasn't on the agenda,
It was,
okay.
it was not for a vote, it was just inspection.
Site.
We saw it coming.
Yes.
We do things very correctly, very formally.
We should have voted. Okay.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
That's the.
Would you introduce yourselves for the tape recorder?
Sure. For the record, Ned Corcoran, an attorney, here on behalf of Michael Moore, Richard Froyo, and joined by Jim DeSalle of DeSalle Burke Associates, whose partner, Jim Burke, prepared the materials that have been submitted. There was a site walk. We were here at the last meeting, and we additional item on the agenda, requested a site walk. And I think the board was, commission was present at a site walk that occurred early in February. And I think, in particular, the issue of this was the issue where the driveway, a stone column and a wall was installed next at the side of a driveway above the slope to the wetland. The plan indicates that the column was set 24.1 feet from the edge of wetland rather than 25 feet. And the wall that goes down along the side of the driveway skews to about 22.7 feet from the edge of wetland. Mr. Burke has prepared an analysis of that condition, has submitted a two-page letter in that regard. I think his letter speaks substantially for itself, but we'll do our best to answer questions. Otherwise, we'd request that the board consider granting a certificate of compliance.
All right, Jim, can you tell us, I think there were two issues that we had. One was the 24.1?
24.1 feet.
From the wetlands. And then the second one was, the wall didn't follow the driveway, and I just eyeballed it, not an engineering perspective, but the wall went kind of straight and actually pinched in closer to the wetlands rather than following the driveway. And I'm distinguishing the wall from the pillar.
Here, yeah.
I think what happened, and I'm not 100% sure, but this thing's been staked out 1,000 times. But I think what happened was when the pillar went in, it went in parallel with the one across from it, and the driveway curves around to the left. And the wall that was put in there is virtually a straight wall. And it came off perpendicular off the back part of the column.
Right.
And so instead of curving it and staying the 25 feet or closer,
24.1, yeah.
it went 24, 23, 22.
Why was that?
I have no idea.
Well, who
Did you,
did it? Who
did you
did
get the
it?
dimension? Actually, we.
22.7, it's on the
Yes,
plan that was
it's on the
submitted.
plan.
Okay, I didn't see it.
Who actually built the wall? Who actually?
The
built that
contractor
wall?
on behalf of the owner.
And was
I
the
think the
owner
owner-
there at the time, do you know? Was he watching the wall being built and?
The owner was there, I think, at the time, the distance that they were paying attention to, or trying to pay attention to, was the column to the wetland, the column at the end of the driveway to the wetland.
And even that was a little bit off.
And that's off by a little less than a foot, or a lot less, it's off by just about a foot. I don't know whether anybody was paying attention to the angle. It looks like the edge of wetland from the plan actually jogs a little bit towards the property line. And so there's a merge, and there's a sort of a gradual closing in on each other down to a point of 22.7 feet. I don't know that anybody was aware that the wetland was moving closer to the property line or not. Certainly the contractor must not have been. I don't know whether the owner was. I know that Mr. Burke in particular was paying attention to that, the distance from the column. Something happened with respect to the wall. I don't know.
My quick reaction is that I will perhaps share in some responsibility for what I call a pillar, because I'm the guy that leaned out over the stream and held the tape. So we were trying to reverse engineer it, go back, and I know somebody pounded a stake in. I assume the stake stayed where it was supposed to. So I'm much more forgiving of the, 8 inches, the 24.1. Than I am of the straight wall, because the straight wall looks like he's trying to make a bigger swing, more of an arc to get into the driveway before it curves around to the left. I'd rather have him put that wall, and I think it would be less intrusive or less costly if he would have just kind of moved that wall back away, because the 8 inches I can forgive, perhaps because of my role in it, but But the 23, 22, it's getting closer and closer, and there's no purpose of it, and it doesn't follow the plan. And we have had a history of not following the plan.
And I think that's my point, the history of not following the plan. And when the Conservation Commission specifically requires, you know, a certain length, and the house is $1 million house, and the walls are plumb, I assume, and everything is done properly, I assume, the wall of the house isn't curving, or all of a sudden, when the Conservation Commission focuses on an area, it seems as though there's a slight, like it doesn't have to be exact all of a sudden, and I think it should be exact. And 9 inches is a significant difference. It's not, you know, it's not a tenth of an inch. It's, John, I don't, you know, it wasn't just you. They marked the edge of the wetland. They've done it many times. This has been going on for over a year. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Corcoran, of course, but I think it goes to a little bit of a disregard for the standards that we enforce. But, you know, well, we can push the wall a little bit. We can move the column. It doesn't matter that much. Whereas when they're dealing with their own beautiful house, of course you have to make everything exact. And I think we should be, as we're trying to be consistent about, you know, it's 25 feet means 25 feet.
Do you distinguish, as I do, between the pillar and the wall? They're actually different, in my view.
How so? You were blaming yourself a
Yes.
little bit for one?
That's correct.
And I'm saying too, but that was not the only measurement taken then,
Oh, no.
John. It's
We
been
were out there a
taken
lot.
Again and again and again. So that
We've
was
certainly
only,
been many times there.
I think they're equivalent. I do.
My recollection was that we met, in the latest round, we measured it, holding it over the stream, and we said there was a clear dimension that they were gonna maintain between the pillars. Basically, we did the math and we said
Yes,
it was gonna be, I don't remember what it was, 12 feet or 10 feet or whatever it was gonna be.
I agree with you.
And that's what set the location of the pillar.
Right, so I'm willing to leave the pillow where it is, but I'm uncomfortable with the wall because it's clearly different than the plan.
Right.
And even when they put in the macadam, it's like a V there, where the
Right.
driveway curves away, and yet I know it's going to have to go back and fill it in, and the driveway is going to get closer to the wetlands. And there's no reason for why we should be encroaching 3 feet into the non-disturbance zone.
Right.
That's why I distinguish it between the pillar and the wall. The wall should be angled back.
So
to
you're
where the
asking
driveway
them
was
to
planned.
take down the wall and move it over the 3 feet?
Yeah. I think so. I'm
Or
open
we
to
could
discussion.
fine them for the discrepancy. We could,
Sure.
either option.
Or seek some other form of mitigation, such as additional plantings along that entire side. There are some plantings in the lower end, and there are some plantings toward the end, but the vast space is not planted.
Well, they've got to do that to hold the hill anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
not done.
that's not even punitive, you know, that's in their own best interest, you know, any way to do it.
Well, then maybe something else. I agree with the delineation between the pillar and the wall, without any question, because the base point was 12 feet between the
It was
pillars.
12, right?
Right.
That's your recollection?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, you could actually pull the wall back and just eliminate it. Is it holding anything? Is it a retaining wall at that point, Jim?
Very little. What it's doing is channeling the water away. So it's not running down the street and going behind the pillar. Like, remember how it was washed out down by the drainage?
But there's a berm across the end of the driveway that the intent was that the water
To get the
coming.
water down. This is gonna get anything that's starting to go down the hill.
Right.
And take it off towards the wetlands. What's that?
I have 50 robins.
Later.
perfect timing.
Well, I'm glad they exist. What are the numbers?
No,
No,
not
no,
that.
no.
Yeah, we gotta get
All
the,
right, let's wrap this up.
According to,
Let's wrap this up.
according to Jim Burke's letter, he says the wall was constructed, purpose of the wall was to direct stormwater from the driveway away from the slope
Right.
to further prevent erosion. So,
See, I would I prefer to let them keep the wall. It's not significant, they shouldn't have done it that way, and find them
Oops, sorry.
dramatic pause.
Dramatic pause. That's a political thing I don't understand. There we go. We're good.
And fine them because of the discrepancy, and that fine could be $15,000. The whole project is probably, I have no idea, $1.5 million, too, so $15,000 is nothing.
For 15,000, you'd probably want to take the wall down and move it.
That's his option.
He likes the wall. He seems to like, he has beautiful taste, I'd certainly say about your client. Excellent taste if he wants to keep the wall. We could buy a lot of trees for that much money and do a lot of good around town.
From my perspective, I do have concerns about washout along, of water running down and basically sliding off that side and continue, and causing erosion along that side. So if we're not gonna move the wall, I would like to see a curb of some kind, even if it's something to keep the water on the driveway for the length, for, better, most of the length of that side. And then that also gets rid of the issue of them widening the driveway. That was your concern.
It is. And I don't want them to widen the driveway to extend 3 feet into our non-disturbance zone.
Right.
Because that's been, we've been pretty sensitive to that all along.
So you suggesting a granite curb?
I'm not saying something that's solid and permanent and set.
Because an asphalt berm is very easy to
No, not
destroy.
asphalt, yeah, I was thinking
That's what I want to
cobble.
stay away from.
I was thinking cobblestones or something,
Cobblestone's fine.
whatever they want to do that's gonna keep the water on the driveway. I would, rather than doing nothing, rather than a fine, I'm not opposed to them relocating the wall, but I would like to see something that's gonna resolve the problem, the reason why the wall was being proposed in the first place, which was to keep the water from washing out that side.
And I concur with Michael's recommendation with the addition of the plantings for the full length of that side. I'm worried that they wouldn't be there unless we ask for
Well,
them to go there.
I'm not opposed to the idea of telling them that they need to deal with the edge of the driveway and finding them. Because,
You mean a lesser fine, but then do the work as
yes,
well?
exactly, yeah.
I'd be open to that.
Okay?
And I agree with Judith about the planting, that it doesn't seem punitive. I mean,
No,
it's
but I'm just saying-
constructive for us,
I'm just recommending that we have it done.
require it,
Yes,
independent of whatever the.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, we do have a planting plan, it's just further towards the river.
that's right.
Right.
And from what I saw, I wasn't comfortable with that large stretch not having plantings in it. Because you're gonna have,
Well, let me go back, in your construction experience, and Jim, you could probably weigh in on the cost. But if you're talking about leaving the wall, which is not really retaining anything, at least at its fullest extent.
Correct.
Closest to the river, why would you put in a curb? Why wouldn't you just move the wall back? I don't think that's a huge cost, is it?
oh,
You have to demo what's there, and then you gotta rebuild. I don't know what the cost of a wall is. What's the cost of a wall? Do you know,
It's not,
Depends how they built it.
yeah,
I-
it's not an inexpensive wall, but I couldn't tell you.
It's not inexpensive, but I thought when we were there, I asked, is there a footing in it? And I thought they said no. It's just, it's below the surface of the ground, but it's not like, they didn't have to dig down and set a footing.
well, it's not a retaining wall, so.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no lateral pressure on it. So why don't you just move it?
You mean like tie it to the back of someone's truck and give it a pull?
No, I mean, I know you have to deconstruct it, but it's not like you're going down for a footing that's, 3 feet
but
below the
Well, I
surface.
think we're making statements, we don't have
Yeah, I
evidence to
don't-
support that, John.
And I-
We don't know how it was built exactly and how.
Okay,
we
so
don't know.
on that note, if you say that there's a fine, that I'm not opposed to him giving him his option if he wants, if it's no cost, if it's a negligible cost to him to fix the wall and make it follow the driveway, I'm not opposed to that. And and from my perspective, that's his choice. Fix the problem or provide the curb and pay a fine. I'm trying to resolve the problem. The fine is there because it's just grossly wrong. The problem is the wash-off from the side of the road, of the driveway.
Right, but isn't the best way to do that so that it conforms to the actual plan? I mean, it doesn't conform to the plan.
Correct.
That
And that's the
they
purpose of the
submitted, we
fine.
approved.
Right.
So why wouldn't, if you move the wall, do exactly, isn't that going to accomplish the end? My fear is this, when you said a curb, I'm okay with a curb too.
Yeah,
And then some
okay.
plantings, because you've got that V area.
Right.
And maybe the plantings will help retain the wall, retain the
Soil.
water, the soil on the edge of the cliff. But what happens if, the house is sold, new owner comes in and looks at the wall and says, oh, I'm going to move the driveway over here?
Well, that's the curb. The curb is there.
Oh, so the curb is going to run with the land. I mean, we're going to put that into the deed, and my fear is that it's just going to the driveway is going to move towards the wetlands.
Okay, then your inclination is to have them rebuild the wall.
It is, unless your curb was big enough that somebody's not going to move the driveway. My fear is that the driveway is going to expand to reach the wall,
Right,
because that's the most obvious marker.
right.
And when you said you could use cobblestones, I said that's not a very permanent.
Right, and that's why I
Too
came up
lightweight.
with granite.
Too lightweight.
Yep. Take them out with a bicycle.
Okay, well, we're gonna meet again in a week, so do you wanna ask Michael to come to the meeting in a week and we
With
can?
construction costs, we're not.
Because my position would be, even if we said move the wall back, I'd be looking for a small fine, because we need to be consistent. Yeah, you correct it, but then in addition, we fine you for having done it. Inadvertently, negligently, deliberately, and so not 15,000, but maybe 5,000, maybe 3,000, but something. And again, we can use
Right.
that money to buy trees. We're
Right.
trying all,
I
Plus
agree,
something else.
but it's
Yes,
from my perspective,
something.
it's a balance of,
Yeah.
it's a balance of all of this, and it comes down to, but the more you talk about whether or not the driveway's gonna expand out to the wall, no matter what kind of a curb you put there, I think there's some truth to that.
Yeah, you may be right.
And who knows whether a plow takes out whatever you put in for a curb. So 2 years down the line, there's no more curb there, because whatever plow took it out. And then 3 years later, the driveway gets redone, and it's now bigger. So I believe that, I can see that perspective. So if it's a curb, it's gotta be a big enough curb that it's not going anywhere when a plow hits it.
That's right.
Okay. Can you come up with construction costs? Because we have to have a better sense. I mean, I'd like to see the wall moved, but, and not the pillar, but the wall, but I don't have a clue what it costs.
I don't think the cost is relevant. I think its cost is relevant only to Michael. And we can ask him, we should be able to ask him point blank, this is what we're talking about, and what is he willing to propose to come back? And then we can say, well, we're willing to do that, but we're gonna find you in addition. So I'm not opposed to having a conversation with him about what we're trying to achieve and why what he's done is wrong.
I'm looking for a consensus here. If it were up to me, I wouldn't even be talking about, the balance I like, but not mixing and matching. I'm concerned with, what's driving consensus.
I haven't reached a consensus yet.
No, but that's
But
what
I
I'm
see
looking for. I'm
options.
listening.
No, but I see options like I think Michael's talking about, that we let him keep the wall because it has some function.
And the cost to move it might be prohibitive.
And we fine him the 15,000, or he takes down the wall and we fine him $3,000.
Well, in
2,000.
either of those
Something.
scenarios, if he's relocating the wall, that resolves the water issue.
Mm-hmm.
If he doesn't relocate the wall, I'm looking for a curb that's robust enough that it's not gonna be removed by a plow.
Granite.
Yeah, so, and if, I'm not opposed to giving him the option of doing what works best for him, either in terms of cost, understanding that depending on what that option, how that option plays out, there may or may not be a fine associated with it.
As long as it runs with the deed. My fear is that over the years, we're not going to be here, and that driveway's going to expand.
Right.
I'm with you. So that whole perimeter on the right-hand side to me is very fragile.
It sure is.
And that's one of the reasons why I support
The
a
curb.
granite, a solid granite curbing and planting and whatever.
So, on a different note, when you
And
talk
that
about,
would, we talked on site too, about the possibility of actually putting plantings in that fee area between where the wall is offline with the driveway.
Correct. Sister, we did talk about it.
Yeah.
So-
So,
So, in terms of the planting, when we talk about plantings, we typically talk about plants. In the case of a slope like that, where is there a seed mix that you can basically plant, that will stabilize the slope but not die back every year, or that it will actually have, can you do it with a seed mix, or do you have to do it with actual planted plants?
It depends on the slope, and I think
Well, it's pretty
that's such an
steep.
extreme slope that you need actual plants.
real roots,
Yeah, that go down
retaining
deep, yeah.
soil.
So there's no chance of just coming in with a seed mix and a mesh or something to stabilize it and then hit it with a seed mix and,
If it were a
Pretty
more
soft, too.
gentle slope, you could, but I don't think on that extreme slope. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
You need to
Do you-
plant like grapevines, you know? Those roots go down 10 feet.
Oh, they
That's
do?
what you want, yeah.
and they spread?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you have any thoughts or comments or questions? I mean, you're listening to us and our concerns, so I think you have a sense of, where the tipping point is.
I think the best idea that you've come up with was that we come back on March 8th.
All right. Sounds good.
And in the meantime,
yeah.
we'll have a conversation with Michael, and it sounds like your preference would be to move the wall
That's my
along,
preference, right.
so that it forms along the edge of the driveway,
Because
With
it
a
does
small-
two
With a
things.
small fine
and that
as
there...
well.
Because it limits the driveway
Right.
and it resolves the erosion along that side from water flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it matches the drawing.
And it matches the drawing, yeah.
You want to do that. Okay, we'll have a conversation with
Yeah.
Michael and come back with a
Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right.
suggestion for next week.
March 8th, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just think we have to be consistent each time, that someone comes in for an as-built, and it's not as it's supposed to be, and we say, one, fix it, and some sort of monetary, something, even if it's only $500, something
Yeah, but
each
if-
My
time,
point is that
consistently.
monetary can be a requirement to do something in addition. So you could say, move the wall, give me $7,000, just putting the midpoint. Or you could say, move the wall and curb that whole area.
I just prefer to see a benefit to the town and not to the property owner.
No. To me, the curbing would be to the benefit of the environment.
Right. Controlling washout and.
That's true. That's
It's an
true.
extremely fragile and soft area.
That's true.
It sure
So
is.
if someone resolves the issue, like in this case, if he were to come back and say, I made a mistake, they didn't build it the way they were supposed to, I wasn't unaware of it, right, okay, give them that. I will have them tear the wall down and put it where it's supposed to be. I don't see that there's a fine associated with that,
I
And
agree.
he may come back with an idea
Because-
too.
I
right?
do. I
You
do.
think there should be a fine associated with that?
I do.
Okay.
Because, like I said, someone spends, $2 million to build a house, everything else is done correctly. All of a sudden, the Conservation Commission aspect, our requirements that are not done correctly, I find it hard to believe it's just an oversight. I think it's a disregard for the areas that we value. I think it's a disregard. I do.
Sure.
I think they should be so careful. And the next time word will be out that we have to do it exactly to those standards. And I think if we say, well, it's not quite enough. I'm
Even
not
if
trying to kill
even if they
people.
fix it though?
Yes, even if they fix it. Now, if it's, a little homeowner and it's clear, it depends on the situation. I'm
Right.
not trying to hurt someone, but I think we need to get the word out.
Sorry.
Well, it's an issue because I agree with the uniformity and the benefits of setting a precedent and then adhering to it. But to the extent that when we were, and we can do this under any other business tonight, but we did a site walk, and there was a fine at the site walk
Yeah.
that we had that's been recorded, or it should be recorded. But that was because they didn't fix it. Because they did something, they're asking us to basically change our order of conditions retroactively. And that's a different situation.
I agree.
But when somebody can fix, whether it's I'll call it a mistake, if they can fix it, then I'm not sure that there's a basis for a fine. You have to, jump through the hoops and make them jump through the hoops. But if it's done in compliance with the order of conditions, then I'm not sure that there's a basis for a fine.
The exception I would make to that would be is if what was done was damaging and.
Oh, I agree with that.
So in this case, it's 3 feet, granted, it's all a construction area, and I would suspect it's probably repairable without residual damage. But if it was.
But if it was damaged, I agree.
Was damaged,
100%.
then you're in a different league, right?
All right. Well, let's see what they say
Let's
next week.
see.
All right. All right, next on the agenda is a request for modification, 395 Hillside Street.
Sorry to keep you.
9:30 is not bad, though, for us.
At all.
Is it an 85 Parkwood?
What's that?
85 Parkwood?
That's not on our agenda.
That's the old agenda.
That's the old agenda.
You're looking
We
at 9,
voted
not
on that,
29.
on the site.
Right, on site, that's what I was wondering.
That's the
Okay.
fine that I was
All right,
referring to.
yep.
But that, we took a vote and
Right.
signed everything, and
So that's done.
that's done.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Evening. I'm Marion McKettrick, and I represent the Rubens at 395 Hillside Street, who have an order of conditions and a plan, and are in the process of renovating a garage or carriage house on the property. And in the course of construction, this was all, by the way, to avoid what I just heard in the previous hearing. Milton Tremitsis, who is the project manager, is meticulous and very careful manager, and he's brought to my attention that after preparing their very detailed architectural plans and meeting with the owners who live in California, so they did have a meeting with them last week to discuss the final, construction work. The issue of the back steps to the porch came up, and this had already been identified with the architects as a problem, because the back steps, which were designed to have, the back porch was designed to have 8 steps. And you maybe recall during the hearings, what happened was we moved the porch over so that it would be a little bit further away from the stream. And the steps are now exiting to the left side. As you face the property, steps go to the left. So that's not changing. But the grade of the land is such that they've decided that you need 11 steps, not 8.
Really?
And that increases the area, the total area. And what we did with that application, which had lots of detail in it, was that the conditions themselves reference a specific area that's going to be allowed for the back porch. And that includes, and we went to a great deal of trouble to get, some estimates for this. It actually includes the steps and includes the porch. So the area now is insufficient to allow for creating the additional 3 steps. In addition to that, the owner wants there to be a landing to step onto coming out of the porch, because she doesn't feel it's a very safe exit just to go straight down the steps. And so that's a design change. And those two things together, at the maximum, would add the amount of square footage that I have described in my letter to you. So it's a change, it's an addition of 34 square feet. It will probably be less than 34 square feet, but this time I asked Milton and the architect to provide an estimate that they felt was more than sufficient, in the hopes that you will favorably review this. I didn't want to have to come back again for 2 or 3 feet or something like that. The point here is that in order to address the grade and the problem of the steps, the other way that you could address it would be on a property that wasn't in a wetland area and wasn't near a stream, would be to just increase the grade where the porch steps meet the ground. But if you do that here, you're going to disturb the ground, and that seems to be, that is a sensitive issue in this particular area. So our request to you, well, first of all, we're here for information. We want to know whether this is something you can approve as a minor change, or whether this requires filing a new application and coming back to you for a full hearing. We hope that it can be approved as a minor change. They are in the middle of construction, but they want to do it the right way, and so I'm just here to get advice from you. And you should have received, I gave you copies of the conditions that apply, that have the measurements. And I did bring the construction plan, because I don't know if you have the whole file here tonight, which I can pass along to you. I probably have extra copies.
Marion, do you have a copy of your letter?
Yeah, I've got the
Oh,
map,
yes,
but I
I'm
don't
sorry, I
have
have
the letter.
extra copies of it.
You have the letter,
Thank you.
Karen?
I think I saw it, but I only see the map in my pile.
Oh, this is the one, okay. Carrying that around in
At
my
least one
other
other
file.
copy.
The other file? The one
Thank
for
you.
Robin Street? Quick question?
Yes.
Okay. So the proposal is to put a landing at the top, have 11 steps. What's at the proposed for the bottom? Is there a landing at the bottom, or is there a, I understand you weren't proposing to change grade, but is there any kind of a landing or a gravel pad or anything to,
There wasn't in the plan originally, and it is not being proposed now, unless you want us to add it to the plan.
no, I'm just wondering about
It was a-
getting off the steps where the slope is going along and you come down the stairs and it's a,
I don't think it's a, step down and tumble down the hill.
Right.
I think this is basically a miscalculation by the architect. He just he did not correctly calculate, the angle of the steps and the angle of the hill.
Right.
So that hasn't been identified as an issue. They do not want to add any cement. I suppose gravel would allow absorption, but they are proposing doing that. If you would like me, if that's an issue.
no, I'm just asking what their proposal was for the bottom. I'm just trying to understand.
I haven't been given any information that there would be any changes other than the addition of more steps.
So this is basically a safety issue to have the steps go down not as steeply, but...
Yes, exactly, yes. And it's in consultation with the owners who are here only periodically, but when they reviewed the plans, they had these two concerns. Milton called me and said, well, what do we do about this?
Right.
I said, well, one thing you don't do is build it and then come back and announce that it's not exactly the size it's supposed to be, so...
Had that conversation.
Then I said, after reviewing the conditions, that it's possible that the commission might consider that this would not be a substantial change and would be able to approve it at a meeting, or if not, then you would have to go back through an application process.
So the sketch that I have here, that's dated April 6th, doesn't show the proposed changes. It doesn't show the landing, and it doesn't show the additional steps.
That's right. Should I have given you a sketch?
Well, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
I apologize for that.
I mean, just so that we could understand what,
Actually, to be honest with you, I'm not sure we're completed a sketch yet, because we want to know what you require.
okay.
If you tell me tonight that you will take this under consideration, and also because you have a meeting on March 8th, as possibly a minor change, I will then call Milton Tremitzes tonight when I get home, and I'll say, they need a sketch showing what is proposed, because they have to have something to
We'd have to have something in the record.
be a
to-
record of what the change
Right.
is.
And I don't see this as a huge change.
I don't either.
I don't either.
So why don't you do that, encourage him to get us a sketch as soon as possible, and then put it on the agenda for March 8th.
Okay.
With that said,
Right.
I'm also not opposed to a minor change to the grade either. If it improves the landing of the bottom of the step, because you're coming down a staircase and it's sloping to the right as you get to the bottom, I'm not opposed to them modifying the grade to effectively create a landing. If it means using some rocks along the right-hand side to make a level zone that you come on, something that was in keeping with the character of the landscaping, it could be insignificant, and possibly reduce the projection of the staircase at the same time.
Well, I'd be happy to take that information back to him.
Yeah.
And tell him, these are some options. You need to decide what you feel does the job best from a safety standpoint. If you want to present two options to the Conservation Commission, you can do that,
I'm
but
just throwing out an idea.
whatever
Just-
the proposal is, you need a drawing showing, what the change is.
I'm just saying that I, personally, I'm not opposed to the idea of a minor modification at the bottom of the staircase to improve the transition from the bottom of the steps to grade.
What if that involved a retaining wall?
That's what I was saying. If it was a retaining wall, maybe it's just 2 or 3 large rocks on the right-hand side that did that in the character of the landscaping. It would be insignificant, but it would allow them to have a horizontal grade that would slope away, and then that would transition out into the landscape, into the lawn.
Because I think a retaining wall in that location would be inconsistent with what we were trying to protect in that area.
My concern, I'm no expert on any of this, but as you recall, this site, not only does the back slope, but in between the buildings, between the house and the garage, that's a graded, they have some grading already, they have some
Yes.
walls. So what we talked about at the hearing was trying not to alter, if runoff were to be increased or there were any change, there were rain gardens being created,
Right.
and you looked at a lot of different alternatives to decide what you supported and what would have the least impact. So adding a wall or putting a wall in will change some of that, and it was pretty complicated discussion.
Right.
So I think we're trying to avoid that. I will ask the question, though, about safe, safe
Transition.
landing at the
Yeah.
bottom of the steps, since they're
Right.
talking about it at the top. And if it's a safety issue, they need to explain, I think they need to explain how it will work, and that's partly what the drawing's going to show you. Probably needs to be a little more detailed, not just this sketch, which shows a few steps but doesn't show the design. And so I hear what you're saying, but I'll find out what it is specifically that they want to do. I'll bring a drawing in on the 8th. and
If you
I'll
could
tell
get it
them-
to us beforehand,
and
it would be very
beforehand,
helpful.
yes, beforehand. Well, I'll tell them as soon as possible.
Sounds good?
Yeah, and
All right. So with your assent, we'll
see
continue
it as a
this?
minor modification. You were asking whether you need to resubmit.
I don't see it that way, yeah.
Okay, well, that will certainly help them. They'll feel
Yeah.
good about that, and they'll get the drawing into you quickly.
Okay, great, thanks. So we'll continue this until the 8th of March.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's coming up the agenda.
Sure enough. So additional business?
I got a letter from, from the Registry of Deeds, Mr. Sorry, I got it in. Yes, from Bill O'Donnell. Did you get this too?
Oh, yes.
Yes, but we don't have a Community Preservation Act. Are we getting any money somehow? He seems to indicate that Milton has surcharges $96,000. Did you read the letter?
I did read it.
It
and-
makes sense to
And you're
me.
right, we don't have a,
Yeah, and I know Bill, and he does a good job, but
Is this from the state CPA
I think this
as
is
an
from the
allocation to Milton?
that's the way it reads, yes.
Okay,
So that might be the state.
that's
But I
that's
thought
the only
you,
alternative when you don't
Yeah,
have a
contribution.
CPA of your own.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
I should know,
I'll
we
give
should
him a
know
call.
the answer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I never saw it.
Okay. I'm the only one who noticed that. Jeez. I read the letter. Okay, I'll call him.
What do you mean, you pay firewood?
I burned my bridges behind me.
So
That's
the
efficient.
trees from Brook Road would probably make really good firewood. The oil saturation and
You
the
want that in
burn
your
for a long
fireplace?
Love
Your
the smell,
family?
huh? You see-
I didn't think so.
I don't think
You
they'd
see-
be good, but.
Yeah.
I'm with John, I didn't even want the chips in that area. No way.
Just get rid of it, right?
Now, isn't there another one on Randolph Ave, near where we were going to put the wind turbine? Isn't there a transformer there?
No,
That's a gas,
That's a pump
that's a
house.
gas pump.
That's what I'm thinking.
It's a pump house, isn't it? It's a
Okay.
septic pump.
Okay.
No, for the gas.
this is-
It's
yeah,
gas for the gas
station.
line going through the
Right.
Blue
It's the
Hills.
Yeah, like
refresher.
Rockland line,
Oh,
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Energy something.
when that was put in.
Okay.
What?
I was
Called a
mixing it
different
up.
company, isn't it?
It's N-Star,
It's
but
a-
it's N-Star gas as
I
opposed to
thought there was
N-Star
a
electric.
septic pump there too. You know where the police cars park at the bottom of the hill?
There is.
Oh,
It's a
yeah, at the
septic
bottom
pump.
of the hill. I'm talking about way back when you go up
Oh, yeah.
next to the golf course.
Right.
That's the Something Trail, Sawgrass Trail. Okay, so we can, everybody should take a look at this. But we can address it on the 8th.
No, it's, why can't we resolve it right now? Right, we have the numbers in front of us, we found them, so why can't we resolve it right now? It was purely based on were the numbers reasonably correct?
Yeah, but just because this area of land, there's gonna be some controversy, so we'll probably want to dot our i's and cross our t's.
I
I
agree
think
with-
so, because we've already continued it,
Okay,
and the public is left, in case somebody had an interest.
I agree.
okay.
Sorry, Mark.
So,
Nice
I
try.
don't-
We're here, it doesn't matter.
You're still trying to get out of March 8th.
No, actually, it's gonna be a short meeting, I'm hoping.
it will be. So these are going to 50 Robins, right? Everybody watch now, here they go.
Come on, take a picture.
Where were they?
They were in my folder for tonight. I don't know, because the envelopes I sent you out just probably had Hillside and those. If maybe the cadets didn't deliver them. You guys.
No, I still have my envelope from the 9th. So this was an extension of the meeting of the 9th?
Yeah,
Yes.
town meeting, and then there was school vacation, and
And some of us were on vacation, and, yeah.
Go skiing?
I did. I was, Bretton Woods. We got a couple good days in, there were a
are we
couple
going to wrap up
really
the
cold
meeting?
days. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I'd like to hear about your skiing. Not that
additional
I've been
business.
skiing. Additional business. Okay, motion to
Adjourn?
adjourn. That's it.
Second?
Okay.
All in favor, or adjourn?
So we're.